Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. We are finally back after a week of no power to bring you our Week 6 previews and predictions. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. If you can't tell, this one's a little bit impromptu. It's a little bit on the fly. We're trying to make it work. Still don't have our main setup going, but we're trying to make it work for you. Get this one out. So we hope you enjoy it. So let's jump right into some games to watch starting tonight, Friday, October 4th. Syracuse at the 25th ranked UNLV Rebels. This is set up to be a great matchup, and it'll be UNLV's biggest test so far. Will they be able to keep pushing past the Matthew Sluka drama and continue to get better and better? And we think they can. Their rushing offense and defense has been phenomenal. They have a great point of attack there, especially now that Malik Williams is their starter, but their weakness is going to be that pass defense, which Kyle McCord and Syracuse have proven they can exploit to the fullest extent. He's averaged a nation's best 364 pass yards per game, so will be interesting to watch there. Let's move on to our Saturday slate, starting with SMU at Louisville. SMU's coming off a dominant win over Florida State, and Louisville an upsetting loss versus Notre Dame on the road. So the momentum is in favor of the Mustangs here, but Louisville is still a great team. And this one will be played in the great state of Kentucky, so we'll have to give the Cardinals the edge there. Next, we have 15th ranked Clemson going to Tallahassee to take on Florida State. Now, this should be a blowout by all means, but it looks like Brock Glenn could be the starter for Florida State this week. DJ obviously has played very poorly, and a change of pace could be the difference maker for the Seminoles, but there's still a lot more to overcome for that squad, so we are still comfortable saying Clemson should win big in this one. Next, we have Virginia Tech at Stanford, a very underrated matchup coming into this week. We're still getting used to Stanford in the ACC, but for what it's worth, they haven't looked awful so far this season, and they're catching Virginia Tech at a pretty good time. The Hokies will have to travel across the country after a controversial loss to Miami, and they have looked vulnerable late in games so far this year. So if it's close in this game with a quarter or so to go, it could spell disaster for Virginia Tech again this week. Next, we have 23rd ranked Indiana at Northwestern. Now, Indiana has been one of the hottest teams to start this season, and they look to continue that hot streak again against a Northwestern team who hasn't been amazing but has shown promising signs defensively this year. We obviously think Indiana has more firepower in this one, but if Northwestern can keep it close, their defense could play a pivotal role in an upset win at home this week. Next, let's talk about West Virginia at Oklahoma State, a battle of two somewhat disappointing Big 12 teams. We think both of these teams have an avenue to a potential Big 12 championship appearance, but they'll have to go through each other to get there, and the formula for the Mountaineers will be the same as Oklahoma State's last few opponents. Run the ball and make Alan Bowman make decisions. Bowman hasn't been bad, but they'd much prefer to rush the ball with Ollie Gordon, who has not been reliable this year. So the blueprint is there for the Mountaineers to take this one. Next, we have 11th ranked USC at Minnesota. Now, Minnesota kept last week's game shockingly close with Michigan, but that had to do mostly with the fact that Michigan has no good quarterbacks. They were able to focus on that rushing attack and keep that one close. USC is a completely different story though. Miller Moss has been on point this year, and Minnesota will have a much more difficult time stopping USC's offense than they did Michigan's. They'll have to have an A+ performance on offense, in our opinion, to keep up with the Trojans. Next, we have UCF at Florida, and on paper, UCF is the better team here by far. But like a couple other matchups we've talked about, they're meeting at an interesting time. Florida is coming off a huge win over Mississippi State to give them a bit of a confidence boost I think desperately needed. And UCF is coming off a huge loss to Colorado at home. That could send them in a downward spiral the rest of the way if they are not careful. Next, we have Duke at Georgia Tech. Duke is 5-0 for the first time in 3 decades. You have to look back into the last century to find a better start for the Blue Devils, mainly off the back of solid defensive play and Malik Murphy, who has been improving each week so far this season. And Georgia Tech is going to have their hands full, but they've been more than capable offensively this year. They've been very effective and efficient so far this year, both on the ground and through the air. This should be a very good matchup and a very important one in terms of ACC postseason potential. Next, we have 8th ranked Miami at Cal. The Hurricanes of Miami are going woke after almost going broke last week versus Virginia Tech. They move on to face Cal on the road this week, a team that hasn't been particularly efficient on either side thus far, but has the potential for a big game any given week. Miami will be the heavy favorite here, but don't count the Golden Bears out, especially if they can get Jaden Ott going this week. And next, let's talk about Texas Tech at Arizona. Now, Tech has been able to bounce back from a shaky start to the season, but their biggest weakness is still easily the pass defense, which is not a good sign when you're facing a team in Arizona who passes the ball nearly 60% of their plays. The Red Raiders have shown they can go out and win in a shootout with the likes of Arizona State and Cincinnati, but they'll be facing a much tougher opponent, in our opinion, in Arizona, who will know exactly how to play to their weakness. And for your Group of 5 highlight matchup, we have ECU at Charlotte. This should be a very fun American Athletic Conference matchup with two teams who are scratching and clawing for a potential postseason game. Both teams have had turnover issues, which should make this one even more fun, and neither team is going to have a clear advantage in terms of being able to effectively attack each other's weaknesses. So where some might see a bad matchup, we see a capital F football game in the making. And now let's move on to our big impact matchups, starting with Iowa at 3rd ranked Ohio State. And listen, we love Ohio State in this matchup. It could get out of hand late in this game, but Iowa's going to make any ball game tough, especially in conference. If the Buckeyes are the team Todd thinks they are, they should win this one no problem. But something tells us Iowa's going to be able to cause a lot of issues for the Buckeyes in this game. Next, we're going over the 12th ranked Ole Miss Rebels going to South Carolina to play the Gamecocks. This is a classic letdown spot for the Rebels. They go to LSU next week. They lost in a huge upset to Kentucky last week. And this week, they find themselves facing a South Carolina team who has found a lot of success on defense so far this year. They get Lenore Sellers back, who was explosive for them in their first couple games. And if you're Lane Kiffin, you have to get a bounce back win here before going to LSU. You can't afford to drop your first 2 SEC games in a row if you have conference or playoff aspirations. Next, let's talk about Rutgers at Nebraska. We absolutely love this matchup. Nebraska has been on a bit of a swing the past couple of weeks. They fell flat against Illinois and then bounced back and looked great in the second half against Purdue. But Rutgers is a team that can play to their opponent's weaknesses. Their run game is solid with Mongai, and Ethan Kaliak-Manis hasn't been terrible. It'll probably be a matter of which team can play the best 60 minutes of football, and we haven't been confident in either team really to do that this year. Next, let's talk about 4th ranked Tennessee going to Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Now, Tennessee will be the big favorite in this one, as we believe they should be. They've looked great so far to start this year, but Arkansas's offense has been able to generate explosive plays very frequently this year. And if they can do what they do best on defense, which is stopping the run, they could put Tennessee in a spot they haven't really been in so far this year, which is a true quarterback duel. We have confidence Nico Iamaleava will be able to come up big in this one, but should still be interesting either way. Next, we have Baylor at 16th ranked Iowa State. Baylor is a team that is 1 or 2 big plays away from being 4-1 this year. Really unfortunate games back-to-back against Colorado and BYU for them, but we know they're still a solid team, and they'll be facing an Iowa State team who, while effective, hasn't looked like world beaters so far this season. We think Iowa State has the edge here. They look more complete all around, but don't be surprised if this one is close late into the second half. And last, for our big impact matchups, let's talk about the 10th ranked Michigan Wolverines traveling all the way across the country to Washington to face the Huskies. We have faith in Michigan's defense to get to Will Rogers in this game. We've said that about the Wolverines, and every time we've talked about them this year. But the fact remains they have no viable quarterback options on their roster, and that is going to be rough for them going forward. They can win games, but Minnesota showed us last week if you key in on their run offense, you can keep it close with the reigning national champs, which we think the Washington Huskies are more than capable of doing. And moving on to our game of the week, you voted on it, and this week it is the 9th ranked Missouri Tigers traveling to Texas A&M to play the Aggies. This is a big matchup in the SEC. Missouri has looked underwhelming at times this year, and they face their biggest test yet as they head to Kyle Field to face the Aggies of Texas A&M. And Connor Wigman, their quarterback, will be a game time decision according to Mike Elko. But if he doesn't play, backup Marcel Reed has not looked bad at all in his place so far. Likewise, their rushing attack has been very good, but for the Tigers, they've looked like the better overall team. It'll just be a matter of starting this game hot and not having to play from behind like they have the previous few weeks. And for your players who are watching this one, for A&M, we have the running back Le'Veon Moss. He's been crucial for that Aggie offense so far, already rushing for over 470 yards and 3 touchdowns with an average of 6.2 yards per carry. He's been very efficient for them and has taken the weight off both Wigman and Marcel Reed's shoulders so far. And for the Tigers, it's going to be wide receiver Luther Burden. He hasn't had the most receptions for Missouri so far this season, but he's had the biggest impact when he has the football. And he's going to be going up against a very solid Texas A&M secondary. If he can find the gaps and have a great day on Saturday, it should be a much easier battle for Missouri. And moving on to our upset watch without Todd this week. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to connect with him. He has been offline the past few days, past week really, unfortunately for us. He was really helpful in these kinds, so we're going to have to shoot from the hip on this one, starting with 22nd ranked Louisville versus SMU, who is a 6.5 point underdog. Like we said earlier, the Cardinals are in a pretty difficult spot here against the Mustangs, coming off a loss to Notre Dame. And this should make for a pretty interesting matchup, but we do think Louisville is the better team here, and it will be at home for them, so we're not too worried about this one. We have it at a 5.5 out of 10 in the warm category, but not too warm for our liking. And next we have the Wisconsin Badgers versus Purdue, who is a 13.5 point underdog. Wisconsin has been imploding recently. They've suffered back-to-back losses against Alabama and USC. They had their leading rusher, Chez Malusi, step away from the program, and things are looking pretty bleak for a Badger team that has to face Purdue this week, who also hasn't been amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but they did end up letting go of their OC Graham Harrell, so we don't know exactly what the Boilermaker offense with Hudson Card will look like the rest of the way. And with all of this craziness jumbled together, we feel pretty comfortable putting this in the danger zone at a 9 out of 10 on our upset scale. Could be the beginning of a spiraling point for the Badgers, but we'll have to wait and see. And last, we have the first ranked Alabama Crimson Tide going to Vanderbilt, who is a 22.5 point underdog. Alabama has looked like one of the best teams in the country so far, and the AP agrees. They have them at number 1 overall. Me and Todd probably wouldn't go as far as to say that yet, but a statement win over Vanderbilt here could add to their already solid resume. But Vanderbilt hasn't been a pushover. They have a pretty solid offense matched with a more than capable defense. They should be able to make this one interesting. I would not be at all surprised if they cover the spread here. But ultimately, we don't have a lot of faith in them to pull off the upset, so this one's going to come out to a very cold 1 out of 10 on the upset scale. And moving on to our final segment, the big impact predictions, starting with the first game, Iowa at Ohio State. Like we said, we have faith that Iowa will at least be able to make this one competitive, but if anyone can boat race them, it would be Ohio State. And unluckily for the Hawkeyes, we think this one could get out of hand late. We have Ohio State taking this one 35-14. Next, we have Ole Miss at South Carolina. We like this matchup a lot on paper. It's going to be a real prove-it game for Jackson Dart and that Ole Miss offense. But ultimately, we're going to trust Ole Miss's squad a little bit more than South Carolina's this week. We like South Carolina. We think that defense is borderline elite, but give us the Rebels 28-21. And next we have Rutgers at Nebraska. This is going to be an awesome matchup. Both of these teams need wins here in order to give them an easier route to the postseason. Maybe even potential Big Ten contender odds on the line here. Probably not, but with these records, they're still in the mix. Either way, we are excited, and it'll be a battle in the trenches the whole game, and we think Rutgers will have the edge there. But at the end of the day, we trust the quarterback Dylan Raiola to generate a few more explosive plays through the air than Rutgers will be able to on the ground. Give us the Cornhuskers 21-16. Next, we have Tennessee at Arkansas, and this game honestly could go either way. We think Arkansas is a lot better than many people may think this year, and they have the offense to show for it. But we like Tennessee as an overall unit much more than we do the Razorbacks here. So give us the Volunteers in this one, 31-23. Next, we have Baylor at Iowa State, and this one should play out a lot like the Iowa State-Iowa matchup from a few weeks ago. Both of these teams are going to play similarly, and don't let Baylor's record fool you. There's plenty of talent on both sides in this game, but Iowa State is in a much better place. We trust them to play a more complete 60 minutes of football this week. Give us the Cyclones 24-14. And next is Michigan at Washington. This one will be interesting for a few reasons. The main one being the fact that Minnesota gave Washington the blueprint: load the box, focus in on the run, and force Michigan to get creative. Neither Orji nor Warren are going to be relied upon to get down the field for the Wolverines. So if you can force them to throw the ball or get into their creative play calling early in the first half, you should be able to keep this one close all the way. But until they prove us wrong, we're going to trust Michigan's defense will be the difference maker in these games. Give us the Wolverines 27-17. And last, your capital G game of the week, Missouri at Texas A&M. This is going to be a great matchup. The added factor of this game being at Kyle Field will make this one essentially a coin toss, and we're going to find out just how good Missouri is this weekend. If they can escape College Station with a W, we should be looking at them as an SEC contender, any potential playoff contender, and it's potentially the same on the other side. A&M is going to have a much harder time competing in the SEC with their current quarterback situation, but they've shown they have the defense to win 8, 9, even double-digit games this year, and a win here at home would be the win they need to start those discussions. But alas, we're going to trust our instincts here. We do think Missouri is the better team all around, and we have them winning this one 30-20 to round out week 6 of the 2024 college football season. And that's going to do it for this video. It was a bit impromptu, so if you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll try to get back to our normal uploads as soon as possible. All your support is appreciated, and we will see you in the next one.